Welcome back. This is episode 4 of our 40th anniversary conversation. I'm Eric Saunders, the Executive Director for New Hope Ministries, and with me are my good friends Linda DeCroes and Marian Musser. And we have been taking a decade at a time to be able to share about what God has done at New Hope and how we got where we are today, being a locally recognized expert in human services, changing lives, and being able to impact our neighbors with the love of Jesus. So at the end of our last conversation, we had shared a little bit about how New Hope went from 3 outreach centers to 4 outreach centers with the opening of our Hanover location. And it was by the invitation of another nonprofit organization, the Red Cross, in partnership with United Way and a whole bunch of local Hanover churches, that we had a vision to expand our footprint to southern York County. And we began that work in the basement of the Red Cross building, but it wasn't very long before we had outgrown that, basement food pantry space and said, wouldn't it be great? And, if we had some place bigger and better and more accessible to our community to serve. And so that began kind of the theme for decade number 4 of New Hope reaching out to new communities and making changes and building assets to enable us to be able to do even more work in the community. So that's kind of where we'll start the conversation today, and I invite you guys to jump in.
So Eric, I'm wondering if you could explain what organizational values were evident during that decade and during that time, as we were in that expansion.
Well, New Hope has grown so much. And I just attribute God's blessing and our community's generosity. But even though New Hope is bigger today than it was 40 years ago when we got started, we still have a lot of the same hallmarks, and that would include our Christian faith and our partnership with a local church, but the organizational value statements, and I just have to list them, that have been a roadmap of how we do ministry and how we do service to our community. And they are faithfulness, compassion, dignity, wholeness, cooperation, stewardship, and in the late 2000s we added, I believe, an 8th value, and that was accountability. As we really said that we are loving people, we are recognizing that people are complex and they've got many different kinds of needs, and that we want to be the most effective stewards of God's riches that He's provided to us. But that the people that we're serving have a part to play. And that everybody can do something. Not everybody can do everything, but we were going to provide people with skills, opportunities, and resources, and then expect them to take baby steps and to make changes in their lives and to try something maybe they had never tried before, with the hope, back to New Hope Ministries, that their lives could be better and they could be living the lives of success that God called them to.
So what was the role of the churches during this time?
Wow. So I came on in 2006, and so and I've been here 17 years. It's 2023, which is a remarkable. I had more hair when I started, but there was a fundamental understanding that New Hope was called into being by our local churches, and that we were fulfilling a need that churches were not well equipped or resourced to be able to meet. When you have thousands of hungry families, when you've got thousands of families who are dealing with the effects of poverty, whose kids need educational opportunities, et cetera, and they're coming to the doors of the church community and saying, please help us. The churches didn't have a lot of good answers other than God loves you and so do we. That was why New Hope got started, that we were the social service arm. And what I saw, during decade number 4 is that the churches still believed in this mission. even more so maybe than the early days, that they saw New Hope as their social service ministry, that it was members of the churches and pastors of the churches that served on the boards and the committee, and in some cases the staff, and and so many of them volunteering in the churches and blessing us abundantly with their financial gifts and with their donations of food and donations of clothing, and prayer, and just the church was the integral avenue of support that we needed to be able to run this organization. But also, and I could go on and on because I believe in this church, and parachurch partnership that we've been a part of, that there was an accountability to the local church, that we are called into existence by them, and that the spiritual leadership that they provide to the organization in terms of pointing out needs and providing spiritual direction, we wouldn't be where we are without their help.
That's very true. And I know that in my case, and I'm sure many others too, that we just don't talk about it, I've gotten calls from pastors saying, thank you for what you do, and know that you're prayed for.
Yes.
And that really is an encouragement to me.
Oh, I was just visiting with a church 2 Sundays ago, who they're regularly going to our newest center, the Redland Center, with people from their church and volunteering and serving, and how, the excitement for this ministry to our community, I have to imagine is just as vibrant, as it was when things first started.
Yeah. Well, it offers opportunities for Christians to volunteer in a ministry in their own local community, to touch the needs of people in need in their own local community. And so it offers all of those, it offers that wonderful opportunity to volunteer in my own community.
Yeah.
And that's something that New Hope has brought to these communities where centers have been. But the church has played another role with New Hope, and that is New Hope didn't strategize and say, okay, we're going to open a center here, we're going to open a center here, we're going to open those invitations to come into new communities came from the church. Can you describe that a little more?
Well, when I came on board, I was told that there were needs in communities beyond where New Hope was currently located. And one of those communities was Lemoyne and kind of the West Shore area, communities of Wormleysburg and Cumberland and, Lower Allen Township, those riverfront communities. It was the mid-2000s when a group of local pastors, began talking about, we've got an incredible, we were coming out of the 2008 recession and the, early, 20-teens, and people were struggling and suffering, and we didn't have a strong presence in those communities, and the churches said, we got to do something, we don't know where to start. And so they were recreating how New Hope was founding in their own conversation, and they invited us to be a part of that. And they said, what would it take for New Hope to open office number 5, which is our Lemoyne Center, our West Shore Center. And we said, let's take this journey of faith together, because we've been having the same feeling when we get the calls and we see the need, and we've wanted to do this for a very long time.
Well, and then there were invitations to take a mobile food pantry up to Enola.
Well, the first one actually was to Wellsville.
That's right.
And then Enola became, because the Ronnie Powley Center was a church-supported food pantry in that community, in memory of a wonderful boy who lost his life to cancer. But they established that, so that became New Hope's mobile food pantry, serving the Enola area. And of course, in the last couple of years, we were able to open, office number 8, I think, which was our Enola food pantry location.
Often, so when we'd have a food pantry, an invitation to take a food pantry in, it also often led to an invitation to actually start a center.
Sometimes we started small and built up,
That's
and
right.
then we moved. I say faithful with little, faithful with much, and
Well,
God.
and I think another point about New Hope Ministries is New Hope brought the plight of the poor to the forefront of the community. I'm not
Yes.
exactly sure at this stage that the communities were aware of how much poor there was right in front of them.
That's true.
And I think New Hope's part of making it aware to the community is another reason why we are invited to come to all these places.
Well, I think once, if you don't know, you can be forgiven for your ignorance. But once you know and you realize that your neighbors are struggling to not have food on the table or losing their housing and sleeping in their cars, we have to do something.
Yes.
And if we don't, there's an accountability. I believe that we have.
Yes.
But the challenge is, how many families can I save? How much can I do with my limited resources? And then it becomes a conversation of not can I do it all, but can I do what I'm supposed to do? And so if I give my 2 mites, will God be faithful and multiply that? And if he takes your mites and my mites and your mites, suddenly we got a lot of mites, and it's been the work of the churches, the work of our funders and partners, that everybody gives a little, and pretty soon we have a lot, and that we've been able to impact tens of thousands of families
That's right.
Well,
over the last 4 decades.
And that's part of the idea from the beginning, that
Yeah.
that working cooperatively, we could have a viable center in
Make
the
a big
Dillsburg community
difference.
where it started, to make a difference
Yeah.
in the lives of people.
I live in Dillsburg, and I am not surprised that an effort like New Hope began here.
No, I'm not either.
You know-
After I hear what the businesses and the church community did in working together to get county services to
Yes.
this
That's just so true.
Far-
I mean, we fought for those. We really did. I live in Dover, and I am amazed at how the Dover Center has just
Isn't it remarkable?
bloomed. It was very hard to get Dover started. We didn't have a whole lot of support from the other part of the community. But I have to tell this one story very quickly. I went to a dentist for the first time, a new dentist, and the girl said, "Oh, you work at New Hope Ministries?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "Dover?" And I said, "No, I work in the Dillsburg Center back then." And she said, "If it hadn't been for New Hope Ministries, my brother and I would never have had Christmas."
Yeah.
Just a meeting from nowhere, and she tells me what New Hope Ministries meant to her.
I've heard that story, not from her, but from other people so many
Yes,
times.
isn't it wonderful?
A pastor who says, we were unemployed after seminary and we couldn't afford to pay our light bill. And the gratitude, and we love New Hope, and we have such a loyalty to this organization, but I have to say, this is not the genius of New Hope. This is the work of Christ's people. This is what Christians are called to do, that Jesus said, "I was hungry and you gave me food." And they asked him, "Lord, when?"
So tell us some miracles that you've seen,
Oh my
Eric.
goodness. The financial miracles have been incredible. We're sitting in a beautiful building today that God provided, for us. And we've been able to upgrade our infrastructure and add new staff and new volunteers and new equipment, and I want to call those miracles, but I think some of the miracles that mean the most are the simple stories of a changed life. That somebody who didn't believe that they were worthy can get their GED, can get a job, can start their own business, can come back and say, "Because of you, my life's changed."
And now support a family.
Yes.
Yeah. And how humbling it is to realize it wasn't me. Thank God that, he was able to use me, but it was him working through me. And we are just vessels. And whatever God has given us, whether it's financial resources or time or prayer or, the ability to, operate, heavy trucks, or, whatever it is, that God's going to take that and He's going to use it to bless His kingdom. And I could say so much more as we wrap this conversation up, and we're looking forward to conversation number 5 as we look into the future. So grateful for everybody being able to join us. I just think it's important to leave you, with a thought, because as this decade number 4 wrapped up, we faced the biggest health crisis in our country in a century. And it brought some profound changes to this ministry, and called for some incredible sacrifice. But there were some real blessings too. So please join us in episode number 5 as we tell the story of New Hope through 4 decades and beyond. Thank you for being with us. Thanks for believing and praying and supporting this organization.
Yes.
God bless.
Thank you.